Something the sequel never directly explains is how it connects to the original. Different year, different organizations, different feeling entirely. The first game had the Federal Emergency Management Agency. The sequel has the Homeland Emergency Response Agency. Both have slow zombies and fast ones. But the original feels completely different from the sequel in ways that make a lot of people assume they are separate universes entirely. So, are they the same universe or not? The developers confirmed they are. The sequel is set in the same universe as the original, where the same 732-ZH virus has overrun the world, and the way the developers describe the relationship between the two games is the most useful thing I found when I was digging into this. They compared it to the relationship between Dawn of the Dead and Night of the Living Dead. Same world, different chapter of the same story, with a few things adjusted along the way. If you have never played either game, everything gets explained as we go, because the connection between the two changes how you see both of them. The original takes place in 2011. That is the important starting point. The year the dead first started getting back up and civilization started coming apart faster than anyone had a framework to process. You are a survivor in that game, a person who is alive in a city that is ending, trying to reach an extraction point before whatever is outside reaches you first. The Federal Emergency Management Agency exists. One of the most significant maps in the original is literally called FEMA. It represents the government's attempt to manage the initial outbreak through its existing emergency management infrastructure. But that infrastructure was never designed for something permanent. Emergency management organizations were built around the idea that disasters end. You manage the crisis, you recover, you rebuild. The 732-ZH outbreak had no recovery phase. The dead kept coming. The infected kept turning. The crisis did not resolve into something manageable. It just became the new permanent state of the world. And here's the zombie detail that confuses a lot of people into thinking the two games describe different viruses. The zombies you fight in the original feel different from the ones in the sequel. The first game feels heavier, slower, more like the classic George Romero zombie films the franchise takes its name from. That is not a different strain. That is decomposition. A freshly turned body becomes a runner first. As it decomposes, it slows into a shambler. Further still, and it becomes a crawler. The zombies in the original have simply been dead long enough to slow down. The runners tearing through cities in the sequel just turned. The same virus doing the same thing to different bodies at different stages of the process. The sequel takes place in September 2028, 17 years after the original. 17 years of the dead walking produced a completely different world than existed when they first started walking. The Federal Emergency Management Agency was militarized and transformed into the Homeland Emergency Response Agency because nearly 2 decades of managing a crisis that never ended taught everyone involved that traditional emergency management could not function when the emergency was permanent. The Civil Recovery Corps was formed in 2027 because even the Homeland Emergency Response Agency was struggling to manage what the outbreak had become by that point. Phalanx exists, gene therapy exists, extraction coordinates and deployment structures and formal objectives exist. None of that was there in 2011 because none of it had been built yet. The world in the sequel is not a different universe. It is the original's universe after 17 more years of people trying to survive inside it and building whatever they could around a situation that was never going to resolve on its own. And then there is the detail that makes the shared universe impossible to argue with once you notice it. Iceland. In the original extraction, helicopters carry survivors toward Iceland, the only place in the world without zombies. In the sequel extraction, helicopters carry survivors toward Iceland. Same country, same detail, same confirmed fact about the same world. The developers confirmed that the sequel is essentially what happens to the survivors from the original after they extract. The people who made it out in 2011 went to Iceland. The world kept falling around them. 17 years later, the Civil Recovery Corps is deploying responders back into the ruins of the cities those original survivors escaped from. The survivors of the first game are somewhere in the world of the second. That single detail is the whole connection in one image. So, why does the sequel feel so different from the original if it is the same universe? 17 years happened between them. In 2011, survival was desperate and completely unstructured. A small group of people with whatever weapons they could find trying to reach a helicopter before the dead overwhelmed them. No support, no plan beyond, get to the extraction point. In 2028, survival is still desperate, but it is happening inside a formal structure now. You have a role, an organization behind you, phalanx and gene therapy, and a civil recovery corps chapter that deployed you with a specific objective. None of that makes you safer. A single bite is still a death sentence. But the world adapted to a permanent state of crisis in ways the original never showed you, because the original was set at the moment the crisis began before any of that adaptation had time to happen. The two games feel different because the world they are set in changed dramatically between them. The lore did not change, the world did. There is one more thing worth addressing, because the people who think the two games are different universes are usually pointing at a real inconsistency, even if they landed on the wrong conclusion. The Abisko Hunt in 2023 and Dr. David Mead identifying the virus in 2025 seem to contradict the original's timeline, where the CDC detected 732-ZH in 2008 and the outbreak began in 2011. How can both be true? The 732-ZH virus has a history that goes back much further than either timeline. It was present in the population long before 2008. The CDC found it already everywhere that year. The Abisko Hunt in 2023 did not create the virus. It released a fresh concentrated dose of it from frozen Neanderthal remains that had been preserved in permafrost for tens of thousands of years. That release accelerated the dispersion of a virus that was already circulating and contributed to the conditions that produced the 2026 mutation. The 2008 detection and the 2023 Abisko Hunt are not really a contradiction when you look at the full picture. They are two separate events in the long history of a virus that was always going to cause this eventually. One came first, the other made it worse. That is the connection between the original and the sequel. The developers confirmed they share the same universe, the same 732-ZH virus, the same Iceland, the same brutal reality that a single bite changes everything. 17 years of history separate the two games, and that history changed everything about how the world looks without changing anything fundamental about the threat itself. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next, because Iceland, being the only safe place on Earth in both games, deserves its own dedicated video, and the confirmed details about why it survived when everywhere else did not are worth a proper breakdown. And drop a comment. Freshly turned bodies become runners. As they decompose, they slow into shamblers. Further still, they become crawlers. The slower zombies in the original are not a different strain. They are older. Does knowing that change how you think about what you are actually fighting in either game? Because it genuinely changed how I see them. Tell me what you think.